The shorter version. Utterly severing the relationship between Judaism and Christianity was something that was very important to a man called Marcion. He was born around AD 100 in Sinope, in the Roman province of Pontus, on the south shore of the Black Sea. When he was just a young man, he was banished for heretical opinions by the local bishop. Given that the bishop was also Marcion's own father, you might argue this did not bode well. We do have to be careful with some of the details of Marcion's life, which are all transmitted via his enemies. These enemies are therefore not without their own agendas, and they are fabulously rude. Tertullian called him fouler than any Scythian, not to mention a monster, a savage beast, a gnawing beaver, and oddly, a Pontic mouse. So there. Marcion made a lot of money in shipping, enough to retire and spend his life in theological study and in annoying people. Sometime around 140, he went to Rome and made a big impact, not least because he made a massive donation to the church. They even let him preach. Then they heard what he had to say, expelled him, and gave him his money back. Marcion loved the teachings of Jesus, was a big fan of Paul, and preached a God of love and forgiveness. It was just the rest of it he had a problem with. He decided that Christianity was just too Jewish, so he rejected, the entire Old Testament. He was not the only one to feel uncomfortable about some parts of the Hebrew Scriptures, but where other Christians read these stories symbolically or allegorically, Marcion took the text at face value. For him, allegory was for wimps. The only thing suitable about these unhealthy books was amputation. So he cut out any texts that clashed with his own sense of good religion. The problem was that it wasn't just the Old Testament that was a bit Jewish. There was a lot of similar stuff in the New Testament. So he cut that out as well. This basically left him with 10 letters of Paul, a truncated version of the Gospel of Luke, and a work of his own called the Antitheses, which made clear the difference between his scriptures and the Jewish version. Tertullian mocked Marcion's God as being like a woolly liberal. A better God has been discovered who never takes offence, is never angry, never inflicts punishment. He is pure and simply good. But even that didn't solve the problem. Paul was full of Old Testament ideas and references, and Jesus was a Torah-observant Jew. So Marcion had to find more and more labyrinthine ways of explaining these ideas away. They were forgeries, interpolations. They weren't originals. In many ways, you might say that he is the father of modern biblical scholarship. He created his own organisation, the True Church. It had a lot in common with the church that had rejected him. They baptized people, they prayed and worshipped, and they even celebrated the Eucharist, only with water instead of wine. But it was thoroughly un-Jewish. True to his entrepreneurial roots, though, Marcion was successful in franchising his ideas. There were Marcionite congregations as far afield as France and Syria. Some scholars believe that Marcionites even outnumbered non-Marcionites in the 160s and 170s. It was not until the 3rd century that Marcionism began to decline in the West, but it persevered in the East a great deal longer. Some scholars have suggested that Marcionite congregations were still around in the 10th century, in what is now Iran and Afghanistan. In the 5th century, Marcionite congregations and churches are known to have existed side by side with their Orthodox brethren. It was so confusing that Cyril of Jerusalem warned Orthodox Christians to be careful lest they accidentally enter a Marcionite church. You couldn't be too careful. You, me, and Irenaeus. Persecution was sporadic, but it was real. It spiked in certain areas at certain times. In 177, there was a pogrom against the Christians in the town of Lyon, and among the victims was the bishop, Pothinus. A young man called Irenaeus, about 130 to 200, was chosen to take his place. Irenaeus had been born in Asia Minor, but, following the age-old principle, go west, young man, he travelled to Rome, and then to Lyon, to be a kind of missionary among the Celts in Gaul. Hardly surprisingly, given the circumstances, Irenaeus was a strong defender of the faith. His flock were attacked on 2 fronts, physically, through officially sanctioned persecution and harassment, and spiritually, through the increasing influence of Gnostic thinking. His great work, Against Heresies, discusses all manner of divergent beliefs, from Gnostic mystical hoo-ha to ascetic Judaistic Christianity. It's ironic that a man who had seen so much persecution himself popularized a term, heresy, that was to be used to justify so much killing in the future. Irenaeus also emphasized the importance of strongly shared practices and beliefs, and the transmission of orthodox teaching. As a young man, he had sat and listened to Polycarp, who in turn had listened to apostles, people who had seen the Lord. I distinctly recall the events of that time better than those of recent years. I can tell the very place where the blessed Polycarp used to sit, how he would tell of his conversations with John and the others who had seen the Lord, his mighty work and teachings. These accounts could also be found in the Christian scriptures. Irenaeus was the first writer to promote the four Gospels explicitly as canonical, as true and reliable. He may also have been the first person to describe the Hebrew and Christian scriptures as the New and the Old Testament. The other candidate for this is a man called Melito of Sardis. I thought Melito was a kind of ice cream, but there you go. Ignatius also introduces a new emphasis, the leadership of Rome. He calls it the great and illustrious church, to which, by reason of its supreme status, every church, which is to say the faithful, wherever they may be, must turn.